Welcome back. You're here with Goldberg. Today I'll be talking about my interactions with people who are apologists for religion. Now, you say, this is a waste of time. You're just going to piss folks off, achieve nothing. Indeed, it is a waltz with futility. I find seldom are they interested in the truth trademark, but rather they're stepping forward to protect and safeguard the specific worldview which they have moral or intellectual investment in. So if you ask an honest question, they will assume that you have malicious intent, you have ulterior motives, that you're trying to persecute them. Alternatively, they will rise to this divine tower of moral condescension. They're too good to engage with a pleb like you. You're low IQ, you're a midwit, Dunning-Kruger, Dunning-Kruger. Now, my belief is that they have this response because they can't formulate a competent logical arguments, but I could be incorrect. In the case of Goldberg, I don't consider myself an atheist. I don't hate religion. I just have questions, and I've always been frustrated with the poor attempts at answering, or really not answering, that I've come across. When I was in college, I've brought this up before, I was maybe one semester away from a second major in the study of religion, specifically Christianity. I just didn't want to cough up more fiat for it. And there are times I regret that, as college is a utopia, and after that, real life sets in. But many years after that, 2022, in fact, I said, let me re-engage. Maybe these edgy atheists, they don't, not all that. The Google search types, they just want a quick win. They don't have no appreciation for religion or spirituality. And so I embarked on a quest. I read a number of books. I still do, by the way. I just recently finished a biography of Pope Innocent. I went to quite a few churches, and I would look online for people that were considered experts on the subject. Now, with Catholicism, someone who's liable to come up is Trent Horn. And I actually don't think he's all that bad if you want a primer on what that church embodies. He was, for a long time, considered somewhat based, quote unquote, until he took a position which is not inherently unbiblical, where he was basically defending the rights of thoughts to still be Catholic, assuming that they're sincere in their beliefs and their conviction. Now, remember, Jesus Christ didn't tell, oh, this hoe's got to go. In fact, Christianity spread amongst reformed prostitutes, slaves, degenerates, gamblers. This is the fact. This is not trying to malign or insult anyone. He said that, and then, even though he's not a lefty liberal, he's not pro-mass immigration per se, but he was essentially saying you can't be some alt-right race realist and Catholic because they're contradictory. Well, the Frantesians started saying, oh, he's a cuck, his wife's cheating on him. They dug up a clip of him admitting that his grandfather's a Care Bear, last name Hornstein or Hornstein, and they made the implication that once a Care Bear, always a Care Bear. So kind of a biological determinist argument. It's funny, too, because modern Catholics will sometimes try to separate themselves from Mustache Man. And obviously, doctrinally, spiritually, they're not walking hand in hand, but the social policy towards the Care Bears had precedence with European Catholic regimes, blood purity laws in Spain, the marking of the Care Bears, other things, rules on usury. These were not just dreamt up by the Germans out of like a hat with a rabbit sort of thing. As a follow-up, when the new pope was being installed, you had these debates on Twitter X, and I couldn't bookmark all of them, sadly, but I'll try to recount the best I can. So one entailed a mention of whether Catholics could oppose immigration. And this guy responds, he says, yes, every nation should be Catholic, but there should be closed borders and we should maintain homogenous populations. I'm going, wait, hold on a second. So Catholicism, universal church, everyone is under the Pope, everyone has the same religious, social, moral doctrine, which probably translates into their politics, but you shouldn't intermingle because ethno-state? Remember, Catholicism was one of the initial forms of globalism. Go across the entire earth. Even the Orthodox Church, the Greek version was trying to do that. They had some problems. There were splits in the Middle East. The Russian Church, very much so. The reason why you have these national Orthodox churches has more to do with the invasion by the Turks the Ottomans, and of course the Soviet Union. But by no means were these entities always trying to believe in nationalism and pluralism as far as the countries are concerned. They were empires and they wanted to unify under one body. Another thread concerned the question of race realism. And this guy steps up. He says, well, everyone can be Catholic, but black people are lower IQs, so they have a diminished chance of going to heaven. It's like, hold on, wait a minute. So you want everyone being Catholic, you need to defend Catholic countries and grow the church, but based upon IQ, you might not get into heaven. Number one, isn't it the meek inherit the earth? Or does that not count when it comes to the afterlife? You could make the argument someone who's low IQ, has a basic job, doesn't want for much, isn't necessarily greedy, is just living life, passing it by, has a better chance of entering paradise than someone who's got doubts, someone who's thinking and challenging stuff, or someone who has grander ambitions, who wants more money or power. So right there, it's an issue, but relates to another counter they'll use when you start bringing up problems with theology. They will say, well, there's no true Christian. I'm sure you've heard this at some point. And number one, how do you determine what a true Christian is? Some of them will point to a passage where Jesus said, even though you were in the church, but I didn't know you, so you're not going to heaven. Okay. But how do you know all these people aren't Christians? And if that's the case, why would you even care if they're Christian countries or spreading the faith if you don't even know how many of these folks are actually saved? Why bother? Who cares if you're living under Muslim dominion or you're living under, a secular dictatorship or a Hindu dictatorship, as long as you believe something? But then if you say no true Christian, are you removing yourself from that discussion? Or are you also going to hell because you're not a true Christian? What does that even entail? So we have this problem where people, on the one hand, they want a, say, supranational or metaphysical following for the entire planet, but they also want to put all these hierarchies and regulations as to, well, you're part, but you're not really there. And hey, I'm trying to tell you this. The reason why there's so many Africans in Europe, this starts well before the mass immigration of the 2000s. It was Portugal and Spain, to a lesser extent, that were bringing a bunch of Africans in the early 1900s, if not late 1800s, just to understand. And these are Catholic nations. So you need to figure out, do you prefer the world as it is now and trying to preserve certain elements of it, or do you not care because everyone's part of a universal church? This is something that a lot of these right-wingers, they get gummed up on. Funny enough, I was reading this book by a lady who claimed to escape an oppressive Reformed Calvinist cult in the late 2000s, and she joined the Orthodox Church because she said that they're progressive, they're feminists, they don't try to control women, and they oppose racism. I was like, the Ortho bros were like, whoa. In fact, there's some pushback from the Orthodox people who've been there for a long time, from these right-wingers, especially the Americans, flowing in and trying to make the church more in line with their politics. That's why there was another split where you had some claiming you can't trust the Greek Orthodox, they're too lefty liberal, you can't really trust the American Orthodox Church, and hence you need to go to the Russian church because it's more right-wing Republican. You tell me, folks. As far as these sectarian or doctrinal differences, there was a third thread I came across, and it was posting memes, the differences between Protestants and Orthodox and Catholic on various questions. Well, this guy says, actually, the only reason for those disputes is because of the Care Bears. It's like, yeah, that's right. The Care Bears caused the Great Schism. The Care Bears caused the 30 Years' War, the Protestant Reformation. If you go back to, when Christians ruled the Middle East, and there's been this bastardization of Reynald de Chatillon, even though he was one of the decent people. He was trying to foment a united front against the Muslim cells. Well, these other Christians, for power, for riches, they were backstabbing each other. The same could be said about the fall of Constantinople. And then if you go to the 1800s, Simon Montefiore has a good biography about Jerusalem. There were a lot of people starting these Christian colonies in the Holy Land. But the problem was Different clergies would be fighting, like physically battling. These Christian states would not cooperate. They could have very well reconstituted a Christian nation in the Middle East. And it didn't function because there was all this, oh, I want power, I want this, I want influence, I want dominion over the Temple Mount. But of course, that was all the Care Bears. You have to be clear. The Care Bears, the Mormons were Care Bears. The Jehovah's Witnesses, the Unitarian Universalists are all Care Bears. The Baha'i people are probably also Care Bears. And then at the end of World War One, when the French say, "Hey, let's create Lebanon," you can just imagine if you were these Frantesians and you were France first, they'd be going, "No, we have to be non-interventionist. This is neoconservatism. We can't create a country, even though it's a Catholic one." I mean, how long are you going to blame the Care Bears for every little thing that goes wrong in your religion? It's kind of schizophrenic. And I hate to tell you, but your religion, if you're Muslim or you're Christian, your religion stands upon a Care Bear foundation. That is indisputable. There is no way of escaping from that fact. And in truth, early Christianity was basically an offshoot of Care Bear beliefs. This is why you had disputes amongst the disciples, James, Paul, Peter, as to how much did you have to observe Care Bear customs and practices. Then you have the influence of Rome, and once they actually controlled the empire, they were trying to create more distinctions. But it is not correct to pretend that these religions had their own process of germination independently. Another question that comes up with these folks is the nature of suffering. And I alluded to it in another video. Not so much they want you to suffer, but they are very quick to find justifications for it. And this can be confusing. You'd say, I remember there was some Orthodox guy. He got angry at me because I said I went to this church and it was like 3 hours of standing up, sitting down, a little bit exhausting. Well, you have to suffer because Christ suffered for you. I was like, well, aren't you already saved? To be fair, no one really agrees on that. They don't have concurrence on the Trinity, on whether it's faith alone, works, or works evidence of that faith. Is there something else? Are you predestined? Are some people simply not going to be saved? So it's all up in the air. And yet you might make the point, I'm just trying to live my life. I'm not trying to lie to the government, to other people. I just want to exist. If I'm in a relationship, I ain't trying to cheat on her. So why do I have to suffer? The immediate retort 90+% of the time is going to be, oh, you're getting arrogant. Hello, Job. You think you're too good. You think that you've got an ego. And no, you're just making an observation, because you will see people, including religious people, that act like dirtbags and may go through their entire life without any serious suffering. So how exactly do you wrangle with that? Where I really size it up is in relation to these trad types, and you'll see them on YouTube and especially on Twitter, will they preemptively brag about, oh, I'm going to knock up some 5-foot Oriental woman in the Philippines or Thailand, whatever. Okay, good for you. Obviously, they are carrying forward this kind of red pill arrogance, and what better if beforehand it was the high value male lifestyle, notch counts, now it's I'm a trad patriarch. Well, if you believe God's on your side, well, who can be against you in your own mind? So what you're doing is correct, naturally. And if you're going to have a kid, that's a gift from God. You're not going to say, oh, no, no. So you're going to have something of a narcissistic approach to the world. If you have a son who comes out 5'3", socially awkward, and effectively an inkwell, you're not going to go, dang, I shouldn't have done that. You're going to try to find some kind of spiritual, religious justification. And as such, you'll probably tell your son, oh, that's your cross to bear. Oh, don't worry, you won't be troubled by lust. You'll be closer to God. When you die, you're going to be nearer to his throne in heaven. This is what they will do. And they'll try to come in the comments and deny it. This is exactly what they're going to do. I think it's cruel. I think completely ignoring the relevance of genetics because you want to make some point about how your approach to the world is correct. But when that affects another person's existence, it's screwed up. Yet again, I have to reiterate, if you have this belief, it's not possible that you do something wrong. And as such, that's where we are. So I caution folks, it's not you have to be paranoid and assume that they're always in bad faith, but someone who has this belief system is not necessarily going to give you the truth because they can't do so. They have to bring it back to this conception where essentially God is still good and has a plan for you. A further discussion was surrounding this quote attributed to Mark Twain, although it may not be him. And essentially, they're saying, if you pray for so many things in life, why wouldn't you pray for the salvation of the Dark Lord, of Satan himself? As you can imagine, it set off a lot of people. One girl goes, well, the Catholic Church says, okay, the Catholic Church has never contradicted itself. Another put forward that there was some priest who attempted to do so, and then supposedly the devil appeared as a dog mocking him. Does that mean you give up? Or could that be kind of a test to see how strong your faith is, how much you're willing to take that position? Or they go, we have no common humanity with Satan. All right. Well, they say that men are made in the image of God, and I understand that some people take that too literally. Are angels made in the image of God, or does that be separate? Do you have much in common with an angel? Now, are you allowed to, maybe not believe they have souls, but are you allowed to pray for an animal that's sick, or would that be blasphemous? A dude got quite a few upvotes, and he said, well, you're getting confused because that's a fixed moment in time when he abandoned God, and that will never change. I was like, wait, okay. First of all, how do you know that? Remember that if you think about it, he's going the direction of a kind of dualist model. Marciano at the demiurge versus the good God, and the question of whether good and evil are independent forces in the world. This is what got a lot of the Cathars killed. It makes much more sense logically because you don't have to engage in all this theodicy, which is basically people who are trying to defend the goodness of God in the face of how bad the world happens to be. But if you're saying, as most would, because otherwise it's heresy, if you're saying that God is completely in power over the entire universe and Satan, evil, came out of that, but it's separate from him, but he could obviously do away with it, unless you're saying that there are two forces that balance each other out. Well, couldn't he change his mind? The God of the Bible is not consistent in everything, can be a little moody sometimes. That's how people have observed. So could he not say, you know what, I'm bringing back this fallen angel into my fold and evil is gone, or evil is completely separated from the world? Could he not do that? Much like when it comes to your salvation, is there like a divine constitution that is unbreakable, that cannot be changed? Or could he hypothetically say, you live your life, you believe this stuff, you get there? Could he hypothetically say, yeah, I don't care, you're gonna be cut off from me? Once more, who are you to know? All these people claim, oh yeah, trust me. Yeah, you don't know. You're going on the basis of a book. You're going on the basis of what you heard from some priest. You don't actually, you cannot say with 100% anything. And as such, is it really that far out to suggest maybe you would pray for this creature to come back to the light? One final subject. So I've been getting recommended a lot of Red Pill, MiG2, John Griffin style channels, up and coming. Oh, this is what I learned from being with so many women. This is what I learned from getting divorced. Female nature. It's universal, guys. You can't escape it. Now that's biological determinism. But as much as they'll accede to that point, red pill, black pill, whatever it is, the bulk of them still hold on to trad religion and I'm going to be saved, God loves me, which I always found kind of fascinating. They will further go with the special boomer reserve or special trad reserve. No matter how screwed up women are, if you just are a high value man, you're going to find a great girl who's virtuous, even if you're 40 years old. You just go to the library and start running game. It's like, really? On a 15-year-old? Because that's what you're going to find in the public library. This guy's channel, he's more of a skeptic. He was saying you have all these different religions, they can't agree, they're always fighting. And it's true, you put even 5 people of the same religion in a room, they're going to start having some kind of disputes about the nature of theology, inevitably. And this dude rolls up. Now, there was another commenter guy says, citing from Thessalonians, you can ask questions. This guy goes, don't ask questions. There's a very famous verse that it'll essentially You can't comprehend that stuff. Basically, God works in mysterious ways. Your pea brain doesn't function at that level. And if you question, you'll start losing faith. This is a position I have always had problems with, but in this dude's comment, he says, imagine a world without religion. How would that be? Okay, you might make the argument that religion brings some ethics into the world if you feel someone's looking over your shoulder. Now, we have a demographic in the United States that is extremely religious, hostile to homosexuals, all that, and yet they commit tremendous crime. They have no impulse control. So is that because of a lack of religion? Is that biologically determined as well? Can religion overpower biology, or are some things just fixed, like we talked about with female nature? Like how many women, as long as they're religious, their female nature doesn't take over and create problems for the man they marry? You can look at Muslims. Now, I said maybe a couple of them I've met that are decent people. Most Muslims are absolute hypocritical scumbags, but they think they're superior. So they'll go to a Western country, they'll try to pimp out any woman possible, they'll do drugs, they'll drink alcohol, they'll sell that stuff, they'll work in the prawn business, uh, engage in every form of degeneracy, and then they'll turn around, oh, yeah, I'm a good Muslim. I can't be part of this, and I've got to marry a virgin girl and all this stuff. This is classic Muslim. And the women aren't much better. Now, you might say the Gulf Muslim states, they have very harsh laws, but Muslim apologists will at times suggest those came from pre-Muslim times, that those were imported from Europe, that in fact Islam is this kind of progressive religion. You can hash that out. Even you could say the Soviet Union, state atheism, they had very strict laws. If you got convicted, you were either going to be killed or sent to a labor camp. The appeal process was pretty much non existent if you've read accounts of defense lawyers in that country or cluster of different nations. And someone would go, well, but that was an inheritance of Tsarism. Not exactly. Tsarism was comparatively pretty mild, like, especially the final 40 or 50 years. Sverdlov was put in a concentration camp. Trotsky escaped because they weren't taking that seriously. Now, if you had put Goldberg in charge of internal security in 1910 in Russia, it'd be a little bit different. But the idea that you have a much more, functional ethical society because of religion, that can go both ways. And then you have to start factoring in technology, the position your economy's in. Look at sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, most of those countries, they are extremely religious and socially conservative. That doesn't mean they're functional. So unless you want to just blame colonialism, which is a cop-out in my opinion, look at Central and South America. Quite religious. They pretty much copy-pasted the American constitutional system, and yet they're dysfunctional. So sure, you go, oh, it's because of the Soviet meddling, the American meddling, the Chinese meddling. My point is that just the fact that you have religion is not in of itself an answer. It can be a good thing, or it may not. But these sorts of arguments, whenever someone starts telling you don't question, that should get the cogs moving that maybe this is an individual who is not serious about the truth, but once more just wants to build a safe wall around their mind and the assumptions that they make.